I just oh my God. I haven't.
We're just waiting on the mayor's arrival, so we'll get started as soon as he pops in shortly.
Okay.
Thanks for making it.
You know, I mean, seriously. that's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Congrats.
Thank you.
Cool.
I'll go.
Yeah. it is.
So we stand for the pledge. Recording in progress. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As a way of respecting, honoring, and creating awareness about our past, we begin our village board meetings by acknowledging that New Paltz is on the ancestral land of the Munsee, Esopus, and Lenape people. Please check out our agendas and our minutes and join us in finding new ways to support Indigenous communities. We have some links listed on our agenda, and we hope that you all will help us add to this.
For the business agenda, we need to add item number 9, proof fire department request to sell a truck, and item number 10, approve the fire department request to contract for snow removal. I'm sorry, those are on the consent agenda. I move a motion that we move the consent agenda
As amended.
as amended.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Now let's do announcements. So is our county legislator here? Okay, then let's go and just share with the public that there are upcoming planning board public hearings. One of them is related to 54 South Manheim. This is Manheim Muse. This is the reapproval of the subdivision. This is the senior affordable project that's planned at that location. Another public hearing is the Route 32 and Cross Creek. That's New Paltz Apartments hearing. So that's the draft environmental impact statement. That's for the public to provide feedback on that document. And 6, 8, and 10 Cooper Street. This is a hearing for the site plan amendment. So those are 3 upcoming planning board public hearings, and they're all taking place. So Manheim Muse, it's these are different dates. Oh no, totally different dates. Yeah. So it's just throwing me off because it's a Thursday meeting, right? That's so the Manheim Muse public hearing will take place on Thursday, November 9th at 6:45. And the first public hearing will open for the New Paltz Apartments DEIS also on November 9th at 7 p.m. And the Cooper Street public hearing will open later in the month on Tuesday, the 21st at 7 p.m. Any other announcements from our board?
Announcements. This Saturday, October 28th, is the first day of early voting for the general election this year. And we have an early voting site at our community center. And this year, it's the first time, it's also the last day to register to vote. I know that's something a lot of our community members have worked really, really hard on. So, you know, if you're not registered to vote and you go to vote that day, you'll find out you actually will have a chance to rectify that. The free food fridge right outside Village Hall here at 25 Pottico Avenue. It's open all the time for all of us, and it is more often than not in need of donations. I see them kind of going so quickly on a daily basis. So for some do's and do nots and some suggestions on how to make donations that work best for the community, head over to millionsofbutterflies.org/free-food-fridge. And thanks to everyone who keeps, keeping everyone fed. Narcan and other harm reduction services are available anywhere to anybody, anywhere in Ulster County, thanks to Ellenville Regional Hospital. Ellenville Regional Hospital's Project Rescue Program. I'm actually in the process of becoming a community Narcan trainer myself, but until then, you can just text ERH Rescue to 21000, and they'll respond back about what kind of harm reduction supplies you need, be it Narcan, test kits, snort kits, sex kits, etc. The Never Use Alone hotline could save a life, so save it. It's 1-800-484-3731. And Narcan trainings are always available online through opioidpreventionnp.org.
Any other announcements?
Just a reminder to the community to test your smoke and CO alarms. Volunteer New Paltz Fire Department's been quite busy this past month and a half. In fact, we've had 10 structure fire calls since September 2. Fortunately, each of those calls resulted in very little damage to the structures or to the residents. So it's a good thing to test those detectors. And if you're to join the New Paltz Fire Department, we're always looking for members, and we meet every Monday night at 7 p.m. at the new firehouse.
Okay, so let's move to our business agenda. I guess we're gonna circle back on a brief food fridge discussion with Stella from Millions of Butterflies. We'll do that at a subsequent meeting. We should also open it up to public comment.
Yeah, let's do that.
Does anyone who is here in person want to make a public comment
Should we wait a second?
on any topic at all? Yeah, this is on any topic at all.
Let's open the hearing.
So then I move that we open the public hearing for the draft law unreasonable rent increase.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Would anyone like to make a public comment regarding the proposed law?
I guess I'm first on the list.
You can Len, come up to the table, just so you can capture your voice better.
Good evening. First off, my name is Leonard Loza, and I live in the village of New Paltz at 15 North Oakwood. I guess the first thing I'd like to point out or speak about is that the worth of any property basically has to do with the income and the expense of that property. The dollar doesn't buy what it used to buy. Pine doors bought at Lowe's 2 years ago, 125. Just recently, I bought some, they're 245. Maple doors for my house, unfortunately, I forgot to buy one for a closet door. They were originally 240. The asking price now was 440 for that, 550 to ship it, and 250 to crate it. So Valerie and I drove out to Ohio to pick it up and made it a nice road trip. My friend Vince and I painted 1 3/4 houses this summer. I gave him $14,000 for his labor and the materials. I didn't take any money. I know that for the next 2 years, approximately, there will be no profit gained on that property. You're all aware of the cost of food, whether it be a slice of pizza. McDonald's no longer has the dollar menu. The problem I see with this law, as you regulate the numbers for the rent, if they become more regulatory, fewer repairs will be done. This will increase the value and the worth of a property, especially with regard to resale values and for taxable values. With the vast majority of the properties in the village of New Paltz are rent to student housing, please keep in mind that we don't send children to the New Paltz school systems. I guess more than anything, what I really question about this law, is it within your purview as a village government to introduce this? Thank you.
Who else would like to make a public comment?
Can I do it from here if I'm loud?
It would be better if you came to the mic. You can come right here, Adele.
Adele Ruger. New Paltz Village resident. So I just have a short few questions and a comment. I'm gonna read it, otherwise I forget. So once again, the Village of New Paltz, without outreach to the local landlords, has decided to sneak in an illegal law asking for a form of rent control. And I have a few questions. Number one, did any attorney look this over? I just can't imagine. And can a judge actually rule on something so vague? I don't think so. And what would make you come up with something like this when you must realize that the last proposed landlord law you tried to pass ended in a huge increase in rents throughout the village? One would almost think that that's your goal. The only thing that will bring in lower rents is an increase in rental stock. It's already happening. We have hundreds of units coming up. Affordable housing units for the large developers will also help. This law may create a large backlog in the courts, along with attorney fees for property owners that you know will come back to the tenants in increased rent. Please stop.
Hi, Teresa Thompson. I don't have a prepared statement. I just want to speak in a generalized way. I just want to know what the reluctance is by people on the board to make laws that are non-collaborative with the people that you're going to affect. I mean, you know, we have smart people here that are concerned about the laws you're making. I mean, you know, Matt went to Brown, for crying out loud. You know, I mean, he did. It's, you know what I mean? He's like, I always say, Tim and Matt are probably the smartest people I know in New Paltz. And I've said that to everybody.
Can we hit pause on this particular comment? Because it's really, really hard to hear. Because when we scheduled this public hearing,
Mhm.
we spoke for about 5 minutes about how this is not a law that we are looking to rubber stamp. This is a draft law that we are opening up a public hearing for,
Okay.
where we are seeking input.
Okay.
We are seeking input from landlords, from tenants, from policy nerds. That is the function of this public hearing.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay. So I guess, Tim, then I just feel very burned by the last, the no cause eviction law. Because, you know, 2 summers ago, I spent a lot of time coming and speaking and meeting with people about that law. And it was an epic fail. I mean, nothing ever happened with it. You know, had somebody, you know, there was some collaboration between village government and landlords, you know, that could have went somewhere. You know, we're good people here. We want this same things that you guys want.
This is a draft law that Matt has looked at 2 years ago. This is not, this law is not anything new.
Well, I mean,
This
again,
is a carve out. This is a carve out
Okay, I
to
have,
augment the Emergency Tenant Protection Act.
okay, so
We are
I,
trying to be thoughtful and think about how the EPTA could work and should it be paired with a law like this. That is what we are doing. We are trying to have a conversation. We are trying to figure this out. We are trying to encourage New York State to think differently, because I am also a landlord.
I know.
I, like Len, have to pay for the increased costs of materials
Right.
and labor, and those things escalate, and this law has carve-outs for all of that.
So, I mean. this-
Additionally, like,
Go ahead.
to suggest that we are doing anything in the dark of night, or we're trying to do anything in some sort of secretive way, is the opposite of everything that we have said regarding this law. Everything. So what we are doing is we have circulated a draft, as opposed to having some sort of backdoor conversation with a select group of landlords. We are having a public hearing. That's That is what we are doing here.
No, I understand, but I mean, sometimes this isn't the forum to have.
This is the forum.
Okay,
This
so
is the
I understand
forum.
That's absolutely correct. I believe in that, but to put this, sometimes you have to have a committee to work on the wording of the law and then present it in a fashion like this. So I'm saying, has anyone sat down with?
Matt
Have
has,
you
other attorneys have looked at this, other landlords, the Kempners have looked at this law 2 years ago and more recently. Other landlords have called me and asked me about this draft that we have published. This is the process. We cannot do it any other way, but except for the way we are doing it.
Go ahead.
I suggest that you, Tim, the mayor, set up a meeting with the local landlords. So that, I mean, there's just a few of us here, but there's.
I will not do that. I will not do that. I will do this. I will do this. I will have a public meeting and discuss this publicly where the conversation is being recorded. That's what I will do.
It's happening. Not everyone lives in the village of Newport.
We have zero intention of presenting a draft law and passing a draft law. Zero intention. We want to keep a public hearing open like this for an extended period of time where we might modify the law, we might jettison the law, we might adopt a law after it is edited. You have to have a process. This is the process. This is what we are doing.
But suppose this takes, to draft the law, I would think it would take many, many hours to do. It's not gonna happen in an hour. We're gonna sit here for till
The
midnight.
draft law has been vetted by attorneys.
Has it?
Absolutely, absolutely.
The public hearing process in 2021, but I didn't want to do anything with it without passing good cause. And then we saw where good cause went.
Yeah, it
And
was a
so
waste of
now-
time.
It wasn't a waste of
Okay, it
time.
wasn't a waste.
I think as
was a
stressful
waste
as
of my
it
time.
was personally for all of us, definitely, I think it was a good exercise in the end, because I think we learned a lot about, people's experiences, both landlords and tenants in the community that, we wouldn't have otherwise learned.
Listen, I care about this community. If I wasn't here, I'm sitting here. This is, time that I would be spending with students at the school district, doing things with them, for them tonight and tomorrow. And, I just don't like to be coming here and having these conversations when I know that if you sat down with Matt and a few other people and talked about it first and created this law together, we wouldn't have to come.
Okay, you know what I don't like? I appreciate that you want to spend time supporting the school
Yeah,
district.
Right, and this
I think you
community.
do, and the community. People who are impacted by rent increases, where they call my office, they're traumatized
I'm
by the fact
that
they have landlords proposing 15% rent increases.
That's concerning.
You know
to me.
what I do? You know what I have done? I have called those landlords and I said, why are you proposing a 15%? And then they want to start negotiating with me. I said, I'm not who you should be negotiating with. I'm calling on behalf of someone who's calling in under duress
I understand.
because you're proposing a 15% rent
I
increase.
understand.
And
that.
maybe it's reasonable. Maybe your 15% rent increase is because you did a crazy overhaul and improved the property. Maybe it's merited.
I understand that, but
When that same, let me finish what I was saying about this 15% example. So when that same landlord then calls that tenant and proposes a lower rent because they felt bad because they did not understand their particular situation, it feels a little grimy to me. It feels a little grimy, and I don't want to have to take those calls. I wish there were some boundaries. I wish there was a process where landlords were like, you know what? I can raise my rent. I should be mindful of what the inflation rates are, maybe the cost of materials, the way, right? Len is saying like he bends himself into a pretzel to try to figure out, whether he should raise rent or not and how much he spend. And like some of these landlords are not doing that.
So what we are trying to do is to address the fact that not every landlord, it's like regulation is important. I have also sat with attorneys and landlords from this community who have objected to the fact that we have a rental inspection law in this community, right? I sat in a lawyer's office up in Albany, and I was told that we were violating the landlord's Fourth Amendment rights. And that's ridiculous. That is preposterous as an argument as to why we should perform safety inspections for rental properties. We should perform safety inspections for rental properties because we want to protect community members.
Well,
And no one's arguing about that now.
no,
But if we had some sort of guidelines that every landlord could look to as to, what's a reasonable rent increase? As opposed to how much money can I make? Right, and I appreciate it. Like, we don't want turnover as landlords. Look, the easiest thing in the world for me as a landlord is for a tenant to stay there for 5 years. And for me not to raise their rent. That's the easiest thing for me. As long as I'm paying my bills, that's the easiest thing for me. And I appreciate that that's your shared experience, but that's not what goes on. That is not what goes on in this community. And that is why we have to look at these things differently. We have to address some guidelines that are being overlooked.
so Tim, let me ask you this. If you impose these guidelines, let's say the school taxes go up next year, they're going to. They're absolutely, I mean, I know.
Yeah, the town government's proposing a 9% tax increase.
There are provisions in this law, again, I didn't want to speak directly to this
There
law.
are, yes, there are.
About
Yep.
school tax increases and,
It's all
okay.
in there.
I mean, basically, I'm
This
here.
law is no panacea, but it is an important conversation that needs to occur.
Right, I agree. So it's, this is public comment, so I'm public commenting. I know you guys are commenting a lot and I appreciate it, but yeah, I know. So, I mean.
I'm here because I just traveled for
No,
24
I know,
hours
I know.
and I'm a little delirious.
I know. It's okay. Yeah. I understand, and I feel your passion and about the subject, and basically, I'm a collaborative person. I just want collaboration, that's all. I think, we all care about this community. We're, as landlords, we care about people getting calls like that. I mean, Tim getting calls like that, that's concerning to me, it's upsetting. But I think that there's a better way to go about it, I think collaborating on, for hours in a room would be better than sitting here for hours and having,
I don't want to do it.
I know you don't want to do it. but
I
there's
don't.
committees involved.
No, we have a solid draft law that is game ready for public hearing. Rip it apart, make suggestions. It's ready for that.
Okay,
It may never see the light of day. It may be edited enormously,
okay.
but it is at the point where it merits a public hearing.
Definitely, things are at the point, if I can just kind of tie up some of what Tim just shared, the Landlord Tenant Relations Council is overwhelmed with these kinds of requests for help. And it's often become Tony and I flipping a coin, who's going to make the call to that landlord and try to be hey, can you not raise this cancer patient's rent by $700? I had a call today from a woman. We raised, close to $4,000 for her just to keep her house for the next few months while she finishes her cancer treatment, because her landlord would not be reasoned with, and that's not a one-off. This was a one-off in that it was a good call today from Diana. Usually the calls aren't good, in
Yeah,
this
of
case,
course.
we kept her house for at least the duration of her treatment,
Right. And I get that, that's admirable.
and we can't do that every week. We can't be flipping a coin
Okay.
with two of us
Things are-
doing that
things are
every week.
Difficult everywhere. This isn't just happening in New Paltz. We don't live in a vacuum, we know that these things are happening everywhere. But wouldn't it behoove the village board to I understand, you don't want to make that call, you don't want to make that call, but you know what? We know some of these people. We could make that call and say, hey, landlord to landlord, I know who you are.
Serve
You
on the
know?
Landlord Tenant Relations Council.
If that's what I need to do to, help.
It'd be
my-
awesome. It would
you
be
know?
awesome to have you on the Landlord Tenant Relations
I
Council.
would love it. I like it's signing up for something else to do.
Well, that's how it
Yeah,
works, right? It's just like, do 90% of the work, right? That's,
Yeah.
like that, like community members who are so generous with their time, and I'm publicly thanking you right now on a sidebar.
No, I appreciate the.
But it shouldn't take that kind of work is what I'm saying. So that's what we're trying to figure out. So we could figure that out in other ways
That's,
too.
I mean,
So that's the impetus
I
of the
think that
law.
it would be better coming from another landlord saying, hey,
It could
what's
be.
going on with,
Yeah.
what are you doing? Why are you doing this?
I do think that I don't raise rents, generally speaking, rarely.
We don't.
$2,000 rent, if I raise it $25, right? That's
That's a lot,
nothing,
right.
nothing, right? But if a law like this gets passed and I get scared, like, you know what? I'm gonna raise rents every year by 5%. Sometimes I don't want to do that. I have properties in Highland. I have tenants there. I haven't raised their rent in 12 years. 12 years. I have a 3-bedroom that I'm getting $1,300 for. They're good tenants, leave them alone. But if there's a law that says I cannot raise rents more than a certain amount, and I put in a washing machine, and I put in a this, I don't want to go to court and fight my $100 increase. I don't want to. I don't want to have to hire a lawyer. It's going to cost me $1,500. And the tenant says you can't raise me $100. That's unconscionable. And then I have to go prove it with my lawyer. That's a problem. And I really think that even though you're inundated in the tenant landlord committee, I think it's probably only a few landlords. There may be just a few landlords.
Well,
I don't think most of the landlords
But
do
couldn't we
that.
make the same argument with the need for safety inspections, right?
Well,
Right,
no one's
we-
saying that we don't need them.
You did. The New Paltz Landlord Association brought us to court in 2015. I sat in the attorney's office. Right? So that was the argument, is that we should not have safety inspections. So it's like are most landlords offering a product that's safe? Probably. But are there a handful that aren't? And then we need to inspect everyone?
I vaguely remember something like that. I wasn't part of that.
I wasn't either.
I think that there were 2 sections of the law asking for, if you're going back to that, I'm happy to talk to you about that another time, because I read that very carefully with the inspections. There was one that said you needed this inspection, and there was another piece that said you needed that inspection. And it ended up being like 2 inspection fees that were very expensive.
Well, we didn't make any changes
So,
back then.
But if I look through, I'll show you where there's that discrepancy.
Okay.
It's a discrepancy in the law. So I think that's what it was about, not having an inspection every year.
No, well, the argument that the landlords, because I remember seeing the smoke coming out of our attorney's ears when they were saying that it was a violation of Fourth Amendment rights.
Anyway,
Yeah, I can't comment. I wasn't there for that, but,
I really think it's
basically, I don't want to.
We have to have this conversation as a community. We have to have laws like this, and maybe it doesn't get done at the local level. Maybe the state needs to do it. But there has to have, what's going on now is not working. It's really just, it's disruptive for communities when people are forced to leave because rents are going up when landlords are not making investments.
But as Adele said, we all know that the answer to no housing is build more housing. I mean, that's what we should be. No, that's not the answer. The answer is to. let
No,
landlords
I mean, when they built more housing in New York City, did the rents go down? So I don't believe in that econ one. I don't believe in that econ one. I mean, I think that's a piece to a very complicated puzzle, but I don't think that is the.
It could be a Band-Aid fix, but at least, you know what? Some people may not leave. Because, right now, I'm sure people are gonna have to leave. Or people are leaving. I know people that have left. you know? they
And
can-
there's a bunch of new units coming online in this community.
Well, that's
right?
great.
Yeah.
I mean, that should help.
We
Something.
suggested something to your board today, you probably haven't read it yet. You ready yet? From the Affordable Housing Board.
I mean, yes, Sana told me that there was a development coming, like, very quickly to New Paltz that was a low, you know, not a low income, but a affordable housing. Oh, okay, yeah, I don't want to take up everybody's time, but
Yeah,
again.
and
my
we've allowed
issue
this
is
to
collaboration.
digress from a
Right,
public
yeah.
hearing into
But
more of a
conversation's
more
fine.
of a convert, and that's fine, because we're a little bit more flexible in terms of how we run our meetings, so I'm okay with that. But if we have someone else who wants to make a public comment,
I mean, oh, call me
Please.
if you want me to serve on that committee, on the board, I'll be happy to.
you should.
Okay.
Okay, let's just appoint her right now. I move to appoint, is there a spot?
Oh.
Put you on the mic.
Here, come, you want to,
The mic. Okay.
Hi, how are you? My name is Rich Langelo. I'm the executive director of the Hudson Valley Property Owners Association. I've been a 30-year resident of Ulster County. I live in Accord, New York. And I represent many multifamily property owners throughout the county. I personally own 5 rental properties in various communities around the county. So we read the draft of the law. And of course, I have it up here. Wait a second. All right. Okay. So there was very similar law with very similar provisions and with similar very good intentions in the city of Albany, and also in the city of Poughkeepsie and the city of Newburgh. The city of Albany is of particular interest in the village of New Paltz because the state is divided into judicial districts. And city of Albany is in the 3rd judicial district. And so is Ulster County, including the village of New Paltz. And the Court of Appeals has ruled in the 3rd district ruled, and I'll just read from their decision. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it just says further, Code of the City of Albany 30-328 interferes with the landlord's right to increase rents in compliance with real property law 26-C, as it imposes additional requirements that a landlord must rebut a presumption that a rent increase of 5% or more is unconscionable. Therefore, despite defendants' good intentions, Code of the City of Albany 30-326 and 30-328 impose restrictions on rights granted to landlords by state law, and thus Supreme Court properly declared those provisions nullified by conflict preemption. So essentially, the core operation of the law has already been determined by Court of Appeals, which in the 3rd district is law. And therefore, this law could not really ever take effect the way it's currently written. Now, I just want to comment on a couple of things, and I appreciate your flexibility. So, there's a lot of comments about affordability. And so how could this landlord, you mentioned this landlord wanted to raise rents 15%. But one thing you didn't ask was, when was the last time that landlord raised rents? I will tell you why. Because many of our members, as was mentioned before, they don't regularly raise rents. And I know personally of landlords who haven't raised rents in 10 years. And that's a problem for them, honestly, because they're not trying to play catch up. And so when a landlord has been undercharging, I have a person undercharging for a 1-bedroom apartment for $600 a year, with heat included. And then all of a sudden last winter, Price of fuel oil jumped by 60%. Price of electricity jumped by 30%. Property insurance jumped by 17%. And so suddenly he found himself needing to raise the rent. So he raised the rent, he proposed to his tenant that he's gonna raise the rent to $900, which is actually significantly below the market rent for that apartment. But now the tenant's complaining, wow, you're raising my rent 50%. So that's why I asked the question, when you said this landlord was raising the rent 15%, the other piece of the question was, well, when was the last time he had gotten a rent increase? That's one.
So I can, like, in addition to that anecdote that I shared about a landlord raising a rent by 15% and me calling, and then he backed away from it very quickly and did not raise the rent 15%.
Right.
I have other close friends who are landlords, and they have explained how they have made mistakes by not raising rents, and now they feel they need to raise rents, and their tenants are upset, and they're like, I have to raise the rent because I didn't raise the rent for the last 10 years, and I probably should have been baking in some sort of rent increase.
Right.
And when I said, why are you raising the rent so much? And they said, because I have to. And they explained why they had to. And I was like, okay, it seems reasonable, right?
Right.
And then that was not about any specific situation. That was just a conversation with a landlord friend. And so I'm just sharing this other
Sure.
example about someone who's raising the rent 15%.
The equation.
It is, right, it is, but the other one, which this property manager did not say, oh, well, we made investments, oh, well, this is.
I want to talk about that in a second. So the other thing that we hear a lot about is that wages haven't kept up with rents. Right? And so I'm actually looking at it's actually the Ulster County website, but they actually pulled the data from the New York State Bureau of Labor Statistics. And there's a graph that shows what were the changes in average wages in Ulster County from 2019 to 2022. And they don't have the 223 numbers yet. But the average wage in 2019 was $45,746. The average wage in 2022 was $56,821, a 24.2% increase from 2019, that's pre-COVID, to today.
These are median household income numbers?
No, this is average wage.
Okay.
Average wage. So if you're getting if you're a W-2 worker and you're getting a paycheck, and Bureau of Labor Statistics knows about it because your employer is reporting it, right?
Yeah.
And so what they do is they take the total number of employees reported and the total wages reported, they divide them one by the other, and they come up with the average wage. Now, I will also tell you, this is a kind of shocking statistic. I was just on the website of Fannie Mae, and there's a AMI calculator. And what do you think the AMI for new 12561 is? You know what it is? Household AMI. Household AMI. That's the number that half of the households in 12561 are making more than, and half are making less than.
Right.
No,
So
median.
there's three census tracts in our community. There are two that are like kind of like North Village, South Village, but include some of the town outside of the village. And then there's kind of a circle around both of those.
Yeah, well,
census tracts.
all the census tracts are the same.
They're all the same? No, they're not.
The AMI is the same.
Not the median household income, they're not.
I'm telling you, they are.
Okay, not, I can pull it up on my phone and show you, they're not.
Just on it.
Okay.
So what do you think it is?
They're like low 50s for the two census tracts that are in the village and high 90s for the census tract that's out.
Okay, I'm on the
Yeah.
Fannie Mae AMI. I'll send you the link. We'll put it in your
On the
section.
census website is what Tim.
Yeah, I just use the census.
112,400.
Okay. And you're saying that that's for the two census tracts in the center of New Paltz as well, or for the zip code? Because
Pretty much the entire Ulster County, but you can get it down to by census tract. It goes down to census.
Ulster County's MHI is lower than New Paltz's.
Okay, so, all right, I just want to talk a little bit about what.
Also, I negotiate a union contract here for our staff,
Right,
and I gave them very, this board, I think I'm very proud of the wage increases that we offered to our staff, and I'll tell you, it's not even close to the numbers that you just provided. We didn't offer anyone 24% raises, not even close.
I'm just giving you the official data. It's shocking, it's surprising.
Okay, but
It is
right,
surprising. It is-
right. Those
it is
are
surprising. It is
big
surprising.
aggregate numbers that probably include a bunch of other macro factors, but no one's making 24% more than they were a couple of years ago.
Oh, but
No
this is-
one.
And this was the comments, because there's a gentleman who actually reports on Ulster County. And I spoke with him about the results, and what he said was, well, the average is 24.2%. He said the actual rise in wages among service workers was actually higher than 24%, because he said white collar workers, their increases were more muted, and service workers, like in the hospitality, service industries, restaurant industries, tended to actually their increases were actually skewed higher, and the white collar workers skewed the number lower. So I'm just telling you what state official whose job it is to track these, what he told me. All right, I just want to talk to you about a second about improvements and ETPA. I know you mentioned ETPA. So you're a landlord, so you can maybe appreciate this. So under ETPA, if a tenant calls you and tells you their refrigerator, by the way, the rules and regs to follow ETPA, 980 pages, 35 chapters. Right? So think about it, what that would mean to small property owners in the village of New Paltz. Okay. So according to those rules, your tenant calls you, the refrigerator died. You call up Clarkson. I need a new refrigerator, $1,000. Okay, you have to send requests for approval down to Jamaica, Queens to spend that $1,000. Then that request has to go back to the tenant for them to sign off on it. And once that's done, you can then spend $1,000 and replace the refrigerator. And then you get to increase the rent by $2.30 a month for 15 years. Because the way they calculate it is you take the $1,000 divided by the number of months in 15 years, 180, and it's $2.30. Now, if you, Mr. Landlord, took that $1,000 instead of investing it in your property, or a treasury bill at 5% right now, at the end of 180 months, you have $3,000. And by the way, and so that buying that refrigerator actually as an investment, or any investment you would make in your property, costs you $2 for every dollar that you invest. So what does that do? It means it drives disinvestment. It drives deterioration, because property owners just can't invest in their properties because it's a losing proposition, right? And by the way, the $3,000 you earned it by rolling over in bed. You didn't have to get holes in the middle of the night, the heat's not working, that the toilet's got to be plunged, whatever, right? So, so basically, it's a tremendous disinvestment, the discouragement of investment. And, you know, I know there's a state push to do good cause eviction, which is really misnamed. It's really universal rent control. Should that pass, and even now, just the threat of it passing has made New York State uninvestable Because why would I invest in New York if they're gonna impose these rules on me when I can invest in wherever, right? Lastly, I just want to comment on the issue of affordable housing. Affordable housing right now in New York State is a myth. Let me explain why. RUBCO, great organization, doing great work, tremendous respect. They just built 2 projects in Kingston. Energy Square and the Arms House. So I asked Kevin O'Connor, how much did each apartment cost you per unit? His average cost was $425,000. Now, let's just take that $425,000 apartment. Let's just pretend it's a single family home. I'm going to go buy this home for $425,000. After I put down a 10% down payment, $42,000, my monthly carrying cost between mortgage principal, mortgage, taxes, is over $3,000 a month. It's like $3,200 a month. And so the cost. So what I'm saying is that RUBCO, if they actually charge the market rate for what they're actually spending, they would have to charge at least, without making any profit, $3,200 a month. So that's hardly affordable. So how do they do it? Well, they do it because they don't pay taxes.
They get federal grants.
They get
to
federal
build- to
grants,
build the-
and for the money they do have to spend, they get like very, very low cost loans
Yes.
with very, very extended, like 50-year repayment. Right? Okay. So yeah, affordable housing could be built, but it can't be built by the private market. The numbers just don't work. Like for example, the Kingstonian in Kingston, at current cost, it's 143 apartments. Each apartment would cost at its previously budgeted number, which has gone up for inflation, $500,000 per apartment. So I don't think it'll ever get built because I don't see how their numbers work, to be honest. So these are some of the things that you need to consider. That oh, by the way, so let's just take the Kingstonian for a second. So each of those apartments, if they put market rate for what it's going to cost them, would be like over $4,000, like $4,200 a month. But there's a percentage of the they have to set aside a certain percentage for affordable. What does that mean? That means that there will be market rate paying tenants who have to pay higher, in other words, subsidized for the affordable. So that $4,200 now becomes like $4,500.
We have an affordable housing law here, right? So
All
if we're gonna play like a big what if macro game too,
Go ahead.
right?
Go ahead.
So if it becomes less advantageous to own property because of the investments, won't the cost of the properties go down and therefore housing become more affordable?
No, this is what happens. This is
I think it will.
Well, this is what's happening in Kingston. The value of the properties those properties have dropped, and they can't be sold because no one wants to buy them, right? And the property owners can't invest in them because it's a money-losing proposition. So what happens is those buildings slowly over time deteriorate. Now, I've been in Ulster County for 30 years, right? When I was in my 20s, when EPA was passed in New York City, I lived in Brooklyn. And what I witnessed that by 1977, 3 or 4 years later, was as far as the eye could see, were bombed out buildings where the landlords either burned them themselves because they couldn't sell them, right? Unfortunately, but net effect was, or tenants moved out because the power got turned off, the electricity got turned off, the landlords walked away, the banks took them back. Squatters moved in, they stripped out the copper, they stripped out the wires, Other squatters started fires to keep warm, all these buildings burned. It was literally in the years from 1974 through 1980, New York City lost on that. There's debate about how many it was, but it was between 30 and 50,000 apartments a year were bombed out and abandoned, hundreds of thousands of apartments. So that's the effect of ETPA. Now, the impact may be slower in Kingston, but it's inevitable. It's going to happen. And you're going to have blight, deteriorated buildings, because you can't invest in them. That's important. That's not really good for tenants either, because they get locked into these crappy deteriorating apartments. And they're like locked in and they can't move, because the move is going to cost them more money. And so it's like a vicious cycle. And, you know, even right now, the 2019 changes to the law, right now they're saying there's like 60,000 apartments in New York City that people have moved out of, and they can't be legally rented because the city requires, before you rent it, in this case, New York City, that they have to be lead-free, they have to be mold-free. There's all these, you know, they need a whole bunch of safety stuff, which is important. Not saying that's not good and real.
Yeah, we don't want to poison the people.
But of course, no, you know, that's a good thing. But, so someone's been living in an apartment for 20 years. The rents have been raised, you know, they're basically way below market. And now it's going to take $75,000 to $100,000 to bring that apartment up to code so it could be re-rented. Money that the apartment, well, the landlord can now, if he spends $100,000, he can raise the rent on $200. So the numbers don't work. So he can't afford to spend $100,000. And so the apartment sits empty. And so we have less apartments. So it causes the availability of apartments to shrink. And there's many reasons for that. But anyway, I think I made my point clear. Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity.
I also want to help with a bit of clarification. So this law was written as a carve out from draft good cause laws, because the draft good cause laws just spoke about 5% or unconscionable. So what we tried to do was we tried to create some guidelines around those concepts. So we actually tried to improve upon those concepts. So in addition to 5%, it also includes inflation. So it's not just that you're capped, there's no hard cap at 5%, right? You can consider things like inflation and investments.
Right.
So that's why this is, that's what we believe. We believe that what we are trying to have a conversation about is the idea of having guardrails that are better than what was proposed in the good cause rental renewal laws.
Yeah, I mean, there are states actually like
New
Oregon
Jersey?
has, yeah, like
That's
Oregon.
good.
Oregon
Good
has
cause law.
a very reasonable good cause law. It says rents can't go up any more than CPI plus 7%, which is pretty generous, to be honest. But the fact of the matter is, it's just that in trying to regulate the financial relationship between landlords and tenants, it's a matter of state prerogative.
I don't think laissez-faire works. I don't. I think we need some sort of guide rails.
Can we make sure we hear any
Okay,
other
yep.
comments? Sorry. Like my aunt died today, so I'd like to get through the meeting, if you
Thank
don't
you.
mind. Thank you. Holding on by a thread.
I'm gonna shoot a question. That's the.
So,
Just state your full name, Bob.
my name is Robert Gabrielli. I'm a lifelong resident of New Paltz. I've had a career in two different professions. And anything I say, I don't want to get into veracity statement. If you have a question, I'll be happy to give you verification of my my statements.
You have to disclose that you were the real estate agent for my parents' house purchase in 1973.
Was it my first house I sold?
Think about it.
Liz, February, I think it was Valentine's Day, not sure. But that was, it was really a great,
They're still in that house.
hey. It's a testament to them that, that they used me for their real estate broker because I knew them in college. They knew me. That's the testament. So I have a whole bunch of things I'd like to talk about. Look, one of the basic things I want to do is be a gentleman. But I feel that I'm not being honest if I couch my words or don't say things. So please, I give you a blanket apology for anything I say that may seem abusive of that. But I gotta tell you, look, for 18 years, I ran a New York State government law enforcement office. I had investigators, lawyers, forensic accountants working for me. You know, a guy went to the doctor. The doctor said, you have a disease. The guy said, I want a second opinion. He said, okay, you're ugly too. So get a second opinion on the Fourth Amendment rights. You send a building inspector to a house and that building inspector sees, I don't care, dangerous drugs, a gun, a child being abused. Do you not anticipate that that building inspector would come back and say to the police, you have to go there right away? So get a second opinion, go to a district attorney and say, what's agency mean to you? So when you have an official, anybody, a public officer who does something in their regular routine governmental job, they are actually, when they see something like that, they come back, they need a search warrant. And they come back and they say, oh, officer, you'll have to get a search warrant. I saw this. They're your agent. When you give them the expectation that they are to report back criminal conduct, and that's a big issue, and I can understand, and I'm sorry that you got that dispute between the two attorneys. Yeah, they aren't always search warrants, but anyway. So that there is something there. I really think you should. I know you like this format, but I really think you should have sent a letter to all the landlords and the property owners. You know, you need some outreach. You really need outreach. We had a Zoom call, was well attended. I don't know how many people are going to come in on the Zoom meeting and register, but most people that I spoke to didn't know what's going on. They had no idea. They had no idea of the consequences, the severity of this law.
I encourage you all to watch the tape from 2 weeks ago when we discussed why we were scheduling this public hearing.
Okay. I really appreciate this. I would have thought it was going to be held to 5 minutes and all that. But I'm really happy to say this. If you guys have problems with tenants calling you, really hire somebody. It's in the public good. And I think every property owner would say, yes, I would like my taxes to go towards those wages. Everybody, here's what to do. Hire somebody to be an intermediary who's not a committee. This is the best way to kill a good idea, send it to a committee. Have one person come in. Listen, you guys get telephone calls? Let me ask you, how many you got? Do you document them? Do you write them down? Do you keep them in a book? Do you follow up?
Alex probably does.
Say again?
I said Alex probably does.
Yeah, I have a spreadsheet.
You can take out redact all the information, give us a summary. Give us a summary, say, here's how many complaints I had, here's what it was, and here's how it was resolved, if any.
I just have a bunch that it
Since
drives me
March
crazy. That's all I can
2020.
say.
2.5 complaints per week on average between landlord and tenant relations council and then me directly, like through like social media and stuff.
Like, I'd love to see what they are, love to see your
Yeah.
narratives.
They're mostly
Two sets
not
down.
able to afford proposed rent increases or basic building department stuff that gets resolved by flipping it
Yeah.
over to the building department
Okay.
for inspection, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so two things. One is you said that 50% was a grimy, 15% increase. In Kingston, if I have this correctly, I think I do, I have a good information. Their rent stabilization board came back with a suggestion to decrease the rents 15%. So if 15% increase is sliding.
Okay, I said it was grimy because the landlord, when they were asked not to raise it 15, they lowered it. So where did the 15 come from?
That's a good
That's grimy,
concession.
that's
That's a
grimy.
good concession, I would say, wouldn't you?
No, I would rather have a conversation with the landlord who's like, you know what, here's my spreadsheet, here's my paper and pencil. This is why I'm doing this 15%. You know what, like I was talking about the other landlord who said, I have to do this because I made mistakes by not raising them over the last few years. I've made these investments. I can defend my number.
The funny thing about being a landlord, the funny thing is, I'm not a landlord, by the way. I do property manage. I'm a recovering landlord. But here's what the big thing is. When you look at the rents, so much is spent, so much of that rental income is cost. You've got mortgage, forget the mortgage, you've got taxes, you've got all kinds of things. So that the top, every dollar and an increase is generally profit. I don't know of one landlord who looked at his kids and said, you can't go to college because they wouldn't give us a property. I just don't want to ask for a rental increase. People have to live. Adam Smith, I know you know Adam Smith is the basis of all economy. I mean, anyway. So I want to go on. What Adele said about racing people, that's called snugging. And it is true. If you have a piece of property, beautiful town, you want to see it knocked up into small little lots, say, we're going to put in restrictive subdivision laws. Everybody runs to the planning board. I better get mine in now. It happens all the time. Say, gas is going to go up. Everybody's filling their car before Monday. Anyway, so that's, I'm glad that they say these things to you. I really do think you need somebody, not a committee member, not you, an independent person. Pay them, it's worth it, and let them help landlord tenant disputes. You'd be doing everybody a favor. So the other thing is rent control, rent stabilization. In rent control, I have a client, a real estate client who's in the Bronx and Brooklyn. He's in New Paltz. He's got $3 million worth of property here. He's in Pennsylvania. He's all over. He's a great guy, came up. He still drives a panel truck. He still does all his repairs as he goes around with guys. He's a wonderful man. And he has a lot of rent control stuff. And he tells me, if you do a renovation over $15,000 and Rich was talking about recapturing, you either recapture 1/140th or 1/164th of your money in a rent. For instance, as Rich told you, I want to tell you again, because it's so important. You get an $800 refrigerator. On the 164th, you're getting it back at $4.87 a month over 13.6 years. If you renovate your house, if you renovate an apartment, this guy did a $40,000 renovation on an antiquated apartment. So he did 40,000. He could only get back 15. After that, guess what? He has to eat it. And he gets for a $15,000 renovation, he gets to raise his rent $107 at 140, or he was on a 164, $91. $91 for 13.6 years. So that's the kind of thing that happened. The second thing is these laws, rent control, rent stabilization, the good eviction law. Stop, full stop. It's not a good eviction law. There's no eviction involved. The evictions that we have are handled by good men who sit behind a bench, and there are town justices.
It should be called like the rental renewal law.
I call it the Obnoxious Tenant Protection Act. If you have a tenant who's bothering the other tenants, he's smoking, he's cursing, he's waving a knife around, you know what? You can't get him out. And the other people will leave.
I think you could get him out if he's violating the lease. And but that's the case with anybody. That's the case. You get a bad tenant, and it's a horrible experience for
Those are
everybody.
really, I just told you, they're really good people, the judges. And you know what they'll do? They'll come in and they'll say, now, son, I'm gonna give you 30 days to stop that kind of conduct. 30 days goes on, he comes back again. He goes, did you really do it? Really, really do it? Let's take another 30 days and I'm gonna put you on probation. Come back. 30 days, he comes back, and you know what he says? He goes, you wanna get evicted? Yeah, okay, go find another apartment. I'll give you 30 days to find someplace else to live. They're nice people. They do a good job. Anyway, New York City,
Due process is good.
yes. New York City has, and it varies, the estimates vary wildly, between 30,000 and 60,000 units currently warehoused. Warehoused means that those apartments have had their rentals set at a rent that is so low that it will cost the landlord more to put people in there and provide services to them. 30 to 60,000 units sitting vacant, and we have a housing crisis. Let me go back to the very beginning. The Emergency Tenant Protection Act is the biggest joke I have ever seen. Will Rogers said there's three kinds of lies, damn lies, and statistics. If you have a city and it's got 100% vacancy, 100% occupancy, and you say, why, the rents are too high. No, they're not. They're reasonable. People are renting them. If it was unreasonable, they'd go to another city. They wouldn't live there. If you had 50% vacancy, you know what that means? It means nobody can afford the rent. They can't afford it. So they go, I'm not going to live there. I can't afford it. I'll have to, and it's vacant. So that's, the whole thing is preposterous. So I'm moving on with my thing. I'm hoping to wind up so you can throw me out of here. You guys did a survey. We did our own survey. We have disparate groups. We're asking for you guys to please provide to us the survey. We've asked for
Survey result.
survey and survey results. Yes, who got the survey, what properties, how they responded.
We'll have an update on that. Not to, sorry to interrupt, just saying that's on the business agenda because we can't close the survey until people respond. So we extended it.
I thought you closed it on the 18th of this month.
Well, we had to extend it. So people who did not respond should have gotten a follow-up.
But you said people who didn't respond would be adjudged to have 100% occupancy.
Yeah,
That's kind of, do you think that's fair?
well, that's why we wanted to follow up again to make sure that was understood.
So why'd you say it? in
Because
the
there's
first
no
place?
response, you know, like
Yeah.
that just
So
struck
if
me
they don't
as
respond-
weird.
If they don't respond this time, what will you say?
There's no way in the world I'm ever going to take action on something because someone didn't respond. So we're going to plug in 100%.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that.
Well, I'm sorry you guys put it in a letter.
No, that's the way the EPTA survey works. But personally, I would never
don't know.
do it that way.
I don't think it is, but okay.
So yeah, the
We
deadline is not the
disagree. We
30th.
disagree. So you should do, if you really wanted to find out how you were doing, you would do a survey of demographics. Now, I've seen a graph on how many people have moved into New Paltz recently, and it's pretty big. But you should do the demographics of people moving in and how many units we've built.
Please. Okay,
And that's the problem. What this government, your government has, our government has, is the ability to help people build units, and we're not. And people are coming in, and
Have you been to our planning boards?
I've heard stories. I know that there's things going on, but I
Our
know.
planning boards are incredibly busy.
Don't get me started. I know you've had a turnover in the building department. And I know that, but you gotta give the building department some Valium, really. I mean, there's a
You have to
crackdown.
give the building department what?
Valium, tell them to take it easy, go easy. There has to be a more liberal interpretation of the building codes. You guys are the legislator, you can do that. This building, look, I don't want to get into, but I'll tell you in private of a outrageous, and I'm sure everybody in real estate can give you at least one or two examples of outrageous stuff that goes on in planning a building. Honest to God, everybody knows it. I mean. All right, wind down. Okay. So you got housing stock and you got population, increase the housing. That's more of a governmental function than changing the fair and even-handed treatment of the landlords. I think there's two sides to every story, and I'm kind of desperate, and I'll tell you why. I lived here all my life. This law, rent control, all this kind of stuff is going to ruin it. You're going to make stagnant housing. People won't put money into investments and renovations and new housing, and it's going to look like bad areas of New York. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. There's a lot of consequences to what you're doing here. I've got the 360-page book that Rich talked about. I've got a copy of it. I look at it and I say, no way I'm reading it. You guys should read it. You should be condemned to read those 35 chapters of over 900 pages before you foist it on someone else. Thank you.
Who else wants to make a comment?
This gentleman here, I think.
Dave, you want to make a
I
comment?
think I'm next, but he's getting
Yeah.
a little exasperated. He said he had a short comment. I didn't.
I'm tired. Dave Caccamo, 27 Grove Street, New Paltz, been here for 53 years. I own one rental house. And I really don't want to be told how much I can raise the rent, or even if I do raise the rent. Because generally, when I have a good tenant, I don't raise the rent. I put a lot of money, I put $13,000 into renovating the upstairs bathroom this year. Heated floor, walk-in shower, took out a jacuzzi that I never should have taken out because some woman said, oh, you don't have a tub. I have little kids. So I went out and got this jacuzzi. I started off getting a tub, but I ended up with a jacuzzi because it was cheaper than buying the tub. Next year I have to redo the driveway, the blacktop, because the guy did it and it was that much blacktop on part of it. So I got screwed there. I have tenants in there now that are wonderful. And there's no way I'm going to raise the rent on them. But when they leave, I'm going to raise the rent because I have to recoup a lot of money. By the way, how was Nimi?
Magnificent,
Are you over jet lag yet?
totally.
Oh, good for you, because I don't think I am, and I came back a lot sooner than you did. But that's really, I don't like the idea of, and I'm not a conservative, but I don't like the idea of somebody telling me, government or otherwise, what I can do with my money. Okay? So basically, that's it. And I don't think this law is a good idea. If there are people that are abusing it, if somebody raises the rent too much, go somewhere else and get a place. If it's students, they all have cars, they could go to Rosendale, they could go to Clintondale, they could go anywhere they want. And don't tell me they don't have cars, because I live right across the street from 6-bedroom house, and everybody has a car there. What are you gonna do, drive from the end of Grove Street to the college every day? I don't think so.
You want us to get rid of the speed limit on Grove Street too?
Hmm?
Do you want us to get rid of the speed limit on Grove Street? You don't want any regulatory
I'm not talking
overstepping by the
about
government?
things like speed limits. I'm talking about my individual investment. I only have one rental house, and that's all I want.
Okay.
Okay? So that's basically all I've got to say. Boy, was that short and sweet.
Thank you.
The point is, he doesn't own the street, so you can dictate what the speed limit is on the street,
No, he likes to zoom down the street.
you know, but even his point is well taken. It's like he doesn't want to be told by anybody, you know, about something he owns.
I'm talking, that's right. I'm talking about what I own.
He doesn't know about the street or the speed limit, he doesn't own it.
Where's your truck?
Hmm?
You close by?
Yeah,
Are you close by?
I'm gonna be short and sweet myself.
Thank you.
I think you both are ready to go here. Matt Heiler, local person involved in real estate and different things. So Tim, when we were working on this language, some of it, and I remember that there's been a lot of case law over the last year and a half or whatever.
Since
You know, because there's I think a Albany thing, I know a Poughkeepsie thing, a Kingston thing, I think a Newburgh thing, maybe not a Poughkeepsie thing, whatever. We all know there's been case law. And a lot of it does seem to revolve around this notion of, certain aspects of the landlord-tenant relationship are codified in state law, and the state law supersedes local law. So I guess there was an opinion written about this particular draft law. So my question is, has our attorney, your attorney, a village attorney, looked at this again recently?
Yes.
Yes, and they feel doesn't run afoul of that issue?
He has concerns, but he was not opposed to us having a public hearing.
Okay, I just am, regardless of the merits of the effort, I just want to make sure we're not wasting our time if your own attorney doesn't think that it's viable. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And again, that's really,
Well, it's the same-
but
the
maybe
same-
it's
the same
worthwhile
thing
having a
with good
conversation.
cause. Like years ago, when we were chewing on good cause and editing it back and forth, back and forth, back
I
and
remember.
forth. At that point, there were attorneys, including our attorney and the attorneys that we rely on from the Conference of Mayors, who were concerned about whether it would be upheld in court, like
Right.
if it was challenged.
Right, and in fact,
Right?
I
And at the end of
believe the reason
day,
you
that
tabled
was
it was
our reason for
Tabled it.
tabling the.
until there was
draft law.
determinations made. So I'm
Yes,
just
so-
making
so
sure
We
that,
would do the same thing here.
gotcha. And then I guess the only other thing, I
We do
guess,
not- We do not write laws and then anticipate rubber stamping them and then subjecting.
I know
everyone to them
it's a
without a
long-
review.
I know,
We have a reputation for doing the exact opposite. We actually we had a law about how high your grass could be. And we wanted to get rid of that and we tabled that as well. Like, we want the public to participate. We want the feedback.
right. Right, my only question was what I just said, was whether it had actually been recently vetted.
Yes.
To there's at least a possibility that they think it might be okay. Okay, the other thing, just real quick, is on the whole supply demand thing, and I know you think it's more than just that, but I think clearly we all do agree that more supply is good. in terms of alleviating this, and because a lot of the actions that have been taken are from
It's a
you.
potential.
You know, we did that, we got rid of the short term, we adjusted the short-term rental law, which should free up some apartments. We put in the accessory dwelling unit, and it is true.
Change the zoning.
Along Chestnut, and look what's coming, right? We got Zero Place, 46 units. We got the Agway and Gateway ones, like I think it's like 6844. We got the big Moriello one, the Libolt ones, like 50 units affordable. So I guess I'm just saying, as we make these considerations, I've lived here 20 years. I didn't grow up here, but I've lived here a while. The whole time I've lived here, this is the first time I've ever actually seen any multifamily development of scale. I mean, I guess there's the Apple cooler got converted down where on the other Moriello land, but I mean, hardly anything, right?
Just really Seafreeze properties.
That's true. That's true. But I guess the Ridge,
Or Mulberry and the Ridge.
but Mulberry was older than that, I think. Bridge is
Not
your,
that old.
Mulberry, then the rich.
the Ridge is the only recent one, but good point. Okay, so we had some there. And then last thing I said, just this is more specific, just one quick comment on the actual law as drafted. We have these rules that allow it to be a reasonable increase. I think that's something that people who aren't commercial investors or landlords perhaps don't understand. Like most people, if you buy a house, you get a 30-year fixed mortgage, right? So it's like locked in at whatever it is. Virtually, and I know this because I do it all day long. You know, I'm a commercial real estate broker. Almost all commercial loans, when you're buying a multifamily apartment building or a college rental or whatever, are usually every 5 years, the interest rates reset. That's typical. That's just how it is. And so one of the reasons landlords may need to increase their rent is that they suddenly wake up one morning and it goes from, you know, typically people were getting loans. It wasn't ever like at 3.5 like it is for residential, but you could get a commercial loan at 4.25, and now you're definitely looking at 7.75,
Yep.
you know, kind of thing. And that can be like a huge impact on even if the thing will float, like even if you can carry it. And so maybe we should consider, I don't know if that just falls into the category of operating costs or whatever, but you know what I'm saying? That's
I love the idea.
That's
of
separate than-
including that detail.
that's separate than
Yeah.
inflation.
As a reason.
Right.
Why rent could.
If you can
increase.
demonstrate
This
it.
is exactly why we have public
Right.
hearings, is
I'm
to
gonna
get
put that as a
feedback like that.
Put it in a
And that, I'm not even suggesting that this law, you know, to your other point, concerns about, you know, whether it will be, you know, challenged based on the more recent case law. All of that remains to be seen, but if we were, like, this is the kind of feedback that we want.
I know. Okay.
I
And
added
then,
that as a comment,
Right.
but it doesn't make a lot of sense. It says add mortgage issue for Matt Eiler's comment in 1025, so we can
Sweet.
look back at the tape.
give me a call.
Right, because you
Yeah.
can't get a 30-year fix for a commercial property.
And the other thing is, if a tenant does bring a landlord, you know, make a complaint, and the landlord has to go to court, it says right now that that can't be held against the tenant. And I agree with that, but we have to be careful not to backdoor like the good cause thing. Like maybe I offer you a 1-year lease and say, I'm raising you from 1,500 to 2,000. And okay, now you're saying, okay, I don't want to pay that. I'm only going to pay the 1,500 and it has to be adjudicated. That's how the law is written.
Yeah.
But it can't be that they can stay there forever. After the term of that 1 year, they should be able to do a regular non-renewal. I think that's important. You know, maybe there's some period there, but it can't be like indefinite just because there's a rent dispute. It doesn't give them right of permanent occupancy.
Mhm.
But there'll be more stuff like that.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Hey.
I want to start by saying I like you all. I disagree with this law, but I'm not, nothing I say should be a personal attack. I want to,
You want a name?
I'm sorry, I'm Daniel, and my last name is Scherer, Scherrer. I own several student rental properties. I want to frame something for you and hope that you can begin to change some thinking here. I remember my father talking to me. He was a veteran of World War II. He was a GI in Europe. And he was talking about when the US was gearing up for war, and that there was some thought that the United States itself, the government, should build some factories to build airplanes and ships and tanks, etc. And Roosevelt was like, can you imagine what would happen? We'll have a committee about land use and where it's going to be, and the war will be over by the time we even get started. So he turned to industry. And I still remember my father saying he wanted to produce 1,000 planes a day. I was like, 1,000 a year. He said, no, they had to produce 1,000 a day. So they had to have General Motors shift from producing cars to producing armaments. They had to turn to industry. I have asked members of this board several times to meet with the landlords or to have us on the board so that we have, I mean, I think I have some very good ideas about how we could increase housing stock here in the village and the town, and thereby do the real thing that would reduce. Well, it's a market. There's always supply and demand. So I want to put that out again. I feel like I've been rebuffed, and I feel that those of us who are in the industry have real and sensible and some not even very controversial ideas for how that could really happen. And I'd appreciate being put on some boards that we could address that and propose things to the village. I want to say about this law in particular, the preface says that it's good for landlords also. It's not. This is I just want to lay it out. I mean, if you try and pass this law, I'm going to be part of the suit, and I'm going to be contributing money to a lawyer, and it's going to make my head explode because I spend about $140,000 a year in taxes here. And it'll be my tax dollars going to the village lawyer. It'll be my personal dollars going to the plaintiff's lawyer. I don't think you imagine you have the right to tell the gas stations how much they can charge for gas, or the grocery stores how much they can charge for groceries, or the restaurants how much they can charge for the meals. I don't think you have the right to tell us how much we can charge. And so again, there's no benefit. The introduction is wrong. So this becomes a taking without compensation. I'll be suing on that basis. I'll be suing on the basis that that state law preempts this law. And I want to just get into the real world here. I do have commercial mortgages. They do change every 15 years, but not only that, every 5 years. But not only that, every year I have to submit my documents. And if my house is not carrying a certain amount of income versus the debt, they can foreclose on my property. Now I just want to get in the real world here. I have one property for sale. Almost everyone coming to look at it is an outside investor. And I'm told that if I want to sell all my properties, it'll all go to outside investors. I have a reputation as a good landlord. Tenants like to renew with, students like to renew with me. I don't think that's going to be the case if a big corporation comes in and buys my properties and runs them. So I think the reality is you guys should be doing stuff to help those of us who have, small single family homes that are taking care of the students. Anyway, thanks very much.
I'm sorry that you've changed your view since the last public hearing on this, but hopefully we can follow up more, because I remember you came and spoke out in favor for my notes.
The one that we finally went back and forth on, I was acceptable.
It was
I
the
appreciate it.
URI, yeah,
But
this law.
this,
It was this one.
It was this one.
it wasn't quite, I will just say.
Identical.
Like,
0 changes.
Well, then let me say that the change that I would like to see
Yeah.
is that if the tenant should initiate court. First of all, I disagree with the survey. I disagree with the basis of the survey. I mean,
The
that's why.
EPTA,
No. This survey is saying how much, what's the vacancy rate?
that's the
and so forth.
EPTA process. That has nothing to do
That
with
has
this.
nothing to do with this. That's only for buildings six or more units, 1974 or before. So that's why it was only certain buildings.
It's in the introduction to the law that you've carried the survey and there's less than 5% vacancy. Right?
Yeah, that was based on, so let me pull up the draft law. So Tim had done an informal survey. Like this year is the first year we've done the ETPA survey of the buildings that would qualify.
Right. So if we're talking, if that
And so that
survey,
study's not done yet. Like I said, that's part of the business agenda I'm hoping we get to before I fall over. Not that I'm trying to say anything about all the great comments that have been made, but Yeah, so that's what that is. It was based on the rental registry.
It would seem from what was published on the website that the survey is justifying this other law. That's what it seems to
Oh,
me to be
Because the
saying.
survey would only qualify like for such a small amount of stock and not qualify like for the whole.
Right, well, have you done it?
village.
So are you doing a survey of the single family homes?
No, the
No.
law would apply to all rental stock,
I know, so are
just
you
as
do-
just as the rental registration law applies to all.
Right, but
Over
but it,
Units, and many of those are single-family homes, because a limited number of 6 or more unit complexes in the village that were constructed before 1974. The existing rental stabilization system provided under New York State ETPA Act of 1974, as amended in 2019, provides little to no protection to the majority of tenants in the village. Moreover, it is anticipated that more single-unit rentals will become available in the village due to the recently adopted local laws regulating accessory dwelling units and restricting short-term rentals. Based thereon, the Board of Trustees' intent and purpose of adopting this local law is to provide for local protection of the existing rental stock where the state fails to provide a method to do so.
if you're basing it on the vacancy rates,
Or not.
It's not, that's the paragraph.
The EPTA requires the vacancy study.
right, so I would think it would make sense then to do a vacancy study of all the housing stock, not just the 6 unit or
can.
more from 1974. Right? I don't know if somebody mentioned it here, but it, even the idea that if there's 0 vacancy, it would seem then that I'm not sure that means it's not a healthy market. It would seem that there's X number of apartments, there's X number of tenants in those apartments. That doesn't seem like an automatically unhealthy housing market. But if you're saying,
It's to provide a safety net for people as opposed to just rents increasing at significant rates that make living hard. Having turnover in a community is not good for a community. We
Right,
want
so-
people to be able to stay here. That's why it's different than, we're not, looking to regulate the price of tacos at, Mexican Kitchen. It's not really disruptive to the community if the price of tacos goes up, whereas it's super disruptive if people are forced to leave because they can't afford to live here.
And basically, the only reason that vacancy study of ETPA is brought up at all in the premise to this law is saying it doesn't cover the majority of our housing stock. So clearly we need something. And again.
I think what we need is more housing, but.
Yeah, we're
I
working
think
on that
solves
too.
it.
And that's one tool in the toolbox. And I didn't mean to make this into a back and forth. I'm just so surprised because, just so many times you came to these hearings in support of this specific law. So I would really appreciate more input, over the coming weeks, I guess, of leaving this open about what changed in the past year, because, what happened in the past year?
Inflation. A
No,
lot of things happened in the
yeah,
past
but-
year.
Yeah, I
It's
know.
fine. I don't think there's.
About if the landlord prevails. I think that's a good point. Maybe that should be a comment.
I feel that this law is a little bit backwards, and that if a tenant feels that the rent is not appropriate, and we even go forward with this law, which I'm going to challenge, that the tenant should take it to court. It shouldn't be up to the landlord to initiate that. So I feel it's a little bit backwards that way.
And one comment I wanted to make is that, in my, for collaboration is that what's gonna end up happening is if this law does come to fruition and this group doesn't like it, you better cross your, Ts and dot your Is because you're gonna get sued. Dan said right point blank, he's gonna challenge it in court. Does the village want to do that? I don't think the village wants to have a lawsuit with people that, are ready, willing, and able to, initiate one. That's not gonna be good for anybody.
Yep, so if we move forward with the law, we'll try to make sure that it's as buttoned up as possible.
And I hope you do, because, there's, from what I've heard is that lawyers have already looked at this law and said it's quote unquote BS.
Super familiar with the
Yeah.
opinion and super
Yeah, I
familiar
mean,
with the two.
Do your due diligence.
And this is, and, you know, these are the conversations that we think are important to be having. So, you know, I don't think that we should not have these conversations. I don't think that, you know, we should just keep things as is and, you know, continue to tell the people who keep calling us about out of bound rent increases that are not justified, that are not explained. You know, if, you know, plenty of landlords can explain their rent increases. When you can't, that's the issue.
Having to explain it in a court of law, and having to hire an attorney to go to court is stressful for a small landlord.
Yeah.
It really, it's a whole deal. It's a whole big thing. Right. Because then the judge puts it off and then the lawyer has to come back. You can be thousands of dollars over rent increase.
Yeah.
Just, even if you're justified, you're still paying a lawyer. Do you want the tenant to pay if they lose in court? Probably not.
You know, one of the, you were asking one of the things that changed. My experience has been that since we've started the good cause evictions, first of all, I do appreciate that you talk with people and that you really want that conversation, all of you. I appreciate that. My experience is that the laws that came through, and particularly during, and this wasn't the village itself, that it was protecting bad tenants. It was protecting terrible tenants. It wasn't protecting good tenants. I bought a house. There was a tenant in place. He was a guy living with 3 women. Everybody had their own room. They each had orders of protection against him because he was, you know, he would barge in on them in the shower. He'd try and barge in on them in the rooms, and nobody could get him out. It was insane, along with the fact that he stopped paying rent. I mean, it was like an insane situation. And I've had a few other situations, and everybody else has, where it was sort of the same thing. And, you know, I'm a little frustrated. I think, I don't remember, it was Southside or whatever, you know, and I totally sympathize with the woman that came here and her rent got raised a ton. It's like the landlords who had huge properties, they're the ones that as soon as the good cause eviction was being mentioned, they raised their rent, you know, 40, 50%, outrageous amounts. I totally agree that that was outrageous. I've kept my rent low.
The Southside was going up before Big Cosby came on the docket. My friend Brent, who's now dead now, so he can't even speak to it, but I have the receipts, you know, like his rent increase at Southside happened before Good Cause was even part of the vernacular, let alone on the table here.
I mean, that's not what the woman who came to testify said. I mean, and I sympathize with her. You know, I mean, the way you're talking about it, I would love to figure out a good way to protect tenants without, you know, I mean, the ones that seem to have gotten empowered were people that were creeps. So anyway, I hope we can continue to talk about it and make it a good law. Thank you.
Daniel.
Thank you, guys.
Sure, Rich, but you have to come up, you have to come to the team.
Sure. Yeah, by the way, I just want to say that it's refreshing to have this open dialogue with you guys. So thank you.
You can say a lot of terrible things about us, but you can't say we're not refreshing.
I haven't said anything terrible about it. I think your intentions are well, you have good intentions. So I just want to correct something that was just said by one of you. So I know of no, there's no reason, there's nothing legal that says that you have to only survey properties that have 6 or more units built before 1974 to determine your vacancy rate. There's no such thing. You can conduct a village-wide survey, which, by the way, would be a much more accurate picture
Completely.
because it's really a how shall I say, a kind of distorted view of the. And so I'm just going to give you an example, City of Kingston, because I'm heavily involved in the City of Kingston. So the City of Kingston has 10,500 rental units. 10,000 total units. 5,500 of them are rentals. And so what the law says is that ETPA, that if the vacancy rate is 5% or less, that's an emergency because the availability is constrained. But when you actually look at the numbers, 5% is actually, I don't want to say it's a healthy market, it may be an unhealthy market, because what it means is if I'm Joe Tenant and I'm looking for an apartment today, and there's a 5% vacancy rate, that means there's 252 apartments available. Now, I don't know about you, but I was a renter for big part of my life. And when I went to look for apartments, it was exhausting. And, you know, if I could, in a search for apartments, look at 20 apartments, like I'd be dead. But if I had in the city of Kingston a 5% vacancy rate, which they could declare emergency, I'd have 252 apartments to look at. So it's hardly to say that 5% is like some sort of emergency. Okay? That's the first thing. Second thing, and this is again an ETPA comment, so it's not really related to your law. So you just indulge me. One of the problems with ETPA, which is that there's no means test. So it doesn't really help the people who need help. And like in New York City, what they found is that over time, it really benefits wealthy white folks, or most of the tenants who are paying these rent. And in my example, I have a 6-unit. I have a 6-unit that's affected by the law. I see these tenants' financials because I have to prove I have to know that they have the ability to pay the rent, right, before I rent it. I have a tenant who's a millionaire. 4 of my other tenants, their incomes are well into the 6 figures. They don't need rent control. I have one tenant, a couple, they work in retail. Their income is not that high. And you know what? I take that into consideration. Right?
I mean, one of the reasons that we dusted off this draft law is because we've been working with the county to try to consider EPTA. I don't think anyone in the village is a big EPTA proponent. We thought that this law actually made more sense in terms of trying to see what would be appropriate in our community. So that's why we're here having this conversation. We're not EPTA proponents.
It doesn't do enough for our community, but it would do a little bit of something to help level things out. Plus, it would get us a whole lot of support from the county because it would be a benchmark. It's one of the benchmarks for all municipalities to check off. The town is working on it too.
Yeah.
The town is working on this law? Or on
Not this law,
EPTA?
but they're working, they just opted into the Housing Smart Communities program and are looking for more volunteers for their board. We populate our board with Landlord Tenant Relations Council and Affordable Housing Board. So as questions come up, you know, it gets kicked to them, but yeah.
That's
This
the
is
Housing Smart
ETPA.
program, not EPTA.
ETPA is one of the benchmarks.
But
So,
there are many benchmarks.
yeah,
Thank you.
it's probably one of the easiest benchmarks.
What does EPBA stand for?
Emergency Tenant Protection Act.
Oh, it's a P. What was the P? Thank you.
Get some rest. Thanks, guys.
We go on with the business agenda.
Yeah, let's keep the public hearing open
Yeah.
and go on with the business agenda. Thanks, Daniel. I'd be fine if we skipped right over both of these.
Let's just go to bills and
And-
claims.
I motion we move I move, what am I supposed to say?
Go ahead.
Yes, I agree with what Lauren just said. All in favor? Aye. And let's just do liaison updates next time unless there's something really important that we want to share now.
It was covered in the announcements.
Just that the hearings are scheduled.
Yeah.
Great. Motion to adjourn. Well,
Okay, sorry. The Oracle's copy of like their edition that just printed today, has a story about the Landlord-Tenant Relation Council's most recent training that we did on campus. So check it out, everybody, to see kind of what we've been up to.
like the coverage?
Yeah,
They did a good job explaining what was discussed. Good.
yeah, it was a nice piece. So yeah, that's it. Now I'm ready to go home.
Okay.
Motion to
Adjourn,
adjourn.
yeah.
Second.
Okay.